Let's see if we can turn this around. Okay, so Virgil asks Kaylee if we're bringing our car, and our car is a beat up red vehicle. So Kaylee responds and says, yes, old red will be there. And then Virgil responds, what, are you talking about Jim O'Neill? Thanks. I do have water. Okay, that's me, and that's my wife, Kaylee. Next one. Yeah, it's the first talk. Yeah, sweet, cool. I was in a cantankerous mood. The first talk by yours truly. We can go to the next one. Move past that state of shame. Oh, we can move past this too. I don't actually want to touch that. Virgil, you can touch that on Wednesday. Yeah. Okay. So there's an ugly stat that haunts missionaries, and it's a repetitive stat. Missionary teams that leave the field in the first 5 years, 80% of them leave because of internal struggle, internal strife. It's not like persecution, it's not oppression. It's they don't know how to do relationships. We don't know how to do relationships with one another. Mission and sacrifice have kind of become synonymous in our thinking. Sacrifice. That's not necessarily wrong, but it is kind of wrong. So sacrifice, and we bolster this with Bible stuff, right? We bolster this with I'm just denying my mother and father and brothers and sisters. I'm just killing my flesh. I'm counting the cost. I'm beating my body and making it a slave, right? And all the while, we're really just quite terrible to ourselves. And then we end up seeing our teams as tools. They're there for productivity and efficiency, right? They're there to do what I can't do because I'm localized and they can be over there. It's efficiency. So people who have studied this stat, a lot of missiologists and people who are called media ecologists. You know, you have the right profession when somebody just says the profession and they're smarter because of it. I feel smart just saying media ecologist. So all the while we end up viewing our team as a tool, and we give what we don't have. Because what's apparent in living for the mission is that the mission is more important than I am, and that people are more important. They're more important than I am. And we end up giving what we don't have. We know it's true and that it'll work. It just hasn't worked in our life yet, but we better give it because it might work in their life. It'll probably work in their life. Really quick, I do this all the time. I had to go to counseling for a year to unwork or rework mission as suffering, as Christianity as suffering. I still have the impulse of reading something that I know is really good and instantly giving it to someone else. So quick to give it to someone else because they'll do right by it, right? They're more important than me. The dark room metaphor is helpful here. Dark room is where people develop photography. It has to be dark. If light comes in too quickly, it overexposes the photography, right? And the image stops there. Very few people can come into that room. It's a smaller room. If you overexpose it, you oversaturate it, you don't ruin the picture, but it's forever faded, whatever degree you allowed it to develop. That's been helpful for me because God is often working images onto my soul, and I overexpose them too quickly, right? I'm so quick to just see other people as more valuable than me. And I overexpose them. They never actually sit. They never actually take shape. I started discovering this through counseling. But mostly, so when I became a Christian, I was 19. God God saved me from a lot. I was a drug addict. I was a heroin addict. I was a mess. I was dying. It's 100 pounds and kind of yellow. We start to look after the things that we pursue. And he saved me. There are two things that I couldn't kick, two like strong external sins. One was nicotine. That's still on again, off again. The other was pornography. I didn't know how to kick it. So 5 years ago, it's so jacked up, the counsel we give, it's like, don't look, don't look. And then we end up vilifying the other gender. It's just not good counsel. So there's certain images, certain women, you kind of just like keep tabs because they're a well that you go back to poison yourself. But they're not poison. They're not poison. You're poisoning yourself by keeping them in a prison inside your soul and then having your way with them however you want them, whenever you want them. So I realized that I was hosting these people this way. St. Teresa of Avila has this work called Interior Castle. She wrote it like 1,000 years ago. Really. And her thesis is that we cannot learn to show hospitality to the people around us unless we first learn to show hospitality to the emotions within us and God's spirit within us. That thesis wrecks me. So every week, we do communion every week, and which is like a 20-minute period, 30-minute period. And I would take one of those women and I would journal out who they are. And I did that for months. Not because I keep that many women imprisoned inside of me, but because I needed to go back and go back and go back. And I needed to humanize them. And that started to unlock things for me. Pornography prevents the development of the prefrontal cortex, our will, our decision-making abilities. It stunts that. So people who are trapped in porn they hate themselves for it because they're doing something that they hate. And it's neurobiologically sound why they're trapped there. So learning to exercise your will in other ways circumnavigates that. Dopamine is a chemical that's released for the reward center, but so is oxytocin. Oxytocin is released when there's human interaction, when I'm making eye contact with somebody, when I'm feeling known by them and seen by them. Oxytocin is released. So seeing them and knowing them. And then as I would fall, then when I would watch porn, then afterwards I would be able to go back and then write out who those women were. And over months of doing that, that started to reshape my soul. I knew the truth that porn was bad. And I'd been an accountability partner and I'd counsel people through porn, but then I was still watching it. But they needed that truth, right? Even if they needed that truth, as opposed to just my earnest confession, right? My honest confession. So here's the paradigm shift. Right, when we believe that the mission, when we're existing for the mission, then again, what's implicit in that is the mission is more important than us. But what if the mission involves your own soul and the souls of your teams? Just 80% of teams that are coming back in the first 5 years are coming back because they aren't known, right? Because they don't let themselves be seen. That's the real cost account, right? What friendship actually costs, what being a good dad actually requires, what fighting through to gain communication with your wife really demands. That's the cost. And that's a price that's harder to pay. It's easier to pay with bravado and watch everything fall apart and say, I'm just a martyr here. That's not a real cost, though. That doesn't cost us anything. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Sweet. So we're just gonna very briefly look at Acts. So what I'm doing, so with a puzzle, you always start with a border, right? We're switching that we're starting with the middle, because the only time you really start with the middle is when like all the pieces aren't broken up and you can kind of like jig them together, right? And then you start building out the border. So we're just jigging some stuff together, and then we'll border it out. Okay. Can all of you turn to Acts 13? We want to see the place of teamness real briefly in Acts, because your team isn't a tool. Your team is the mission. Your own soul is the mission. You cannot give what you don't have. Man, I don't want to hear those kind of hard words with the Messiah on that day. So we want to check ourselves real quick. So Acts 13, I'll read it, and then I just want some quick observations that you guys have. Now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers: Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. Some observations? Whatever, just observations.
Simeon possibly was the man who carried Jesus' cross.
I don't know what to do with that, but that's really cool. Yeah.
That's the feedback.
Yeah.
Why
is it like one kind of character?
University of the group.
That's super cool, isn't it? Yeah.
The lifelong
Diversity of the group. Sorry, that's funny. Yeah, the diversity of the group.
the lifelong diversity of the group. Give me 2 minutes.
They were worshiping Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I like that they all heard the same thing from the Holy Spirit.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
You can volunteer someone else.
Change the shape of the audience virtually.
Yeah.
And just try to read.
Am I? I'm still on there.
Yes. Yeah, you are. Yeah, well,
One more. You have
There was no sense of attachment. They heard the call to send part of the group out, and they were happy to do it.
When the call came, they gave.
this is tricky.
When I do worship, prayer, and fasting, when I call together a group of people to do something like that, it's for something. They're not doing it for anything. They're tending to themselves. They're loving. When you're in that space, there's like deep affection. It's weird. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it is really weird, and you cry easier, but like affection's just right there. I think they're just loving on the Lord and loving on one another. That's what the text tells us, at least. They don't have a motive. They're just there to be with one another. I don't know if I've ever done anything like that without like a motive, like give me an outcome, Lord. You're just with the Lord and with one another. It blows me away. It humbles me. It humbles me. That's important because out of that, apostles are birthed, right? And massive swaths of the church that we have today are a fruition of them just getting together and loving on the Lord and loving on one another. Super cool. Super cool. Okay, so Acts 1:1-12, Jesus is still there. He's about to levitate into the great unknown. But it also says, and all the disciples were gathered there, right? It's really intentional with its language. The same thing later in verses 12-14, they're in the upper room, and it says, and they were all gathered there, right? It's constantly making a point that no one's in isolation, that they're all gathered there. You start to get the sense that teamness and being together is really quite important and a theme throughout Acts. So this is cool. Acts 15 is when the response is Barnabas and Paul, they split ways, right? But they don't leave alone. Yeah. Barnabas takes John Mark. Paul goes with Silas. Silas? They don't leave alone. The point isn't, I have this mission, I'm going to throw off my team for the sake of this mission, right? They both understood that they were being called in different directions, so they buddied up. They buddied up and they went those directions, but they didn't go alone. Acts 20, oh man. I wish I could read that whole passage. I could read some of it. So talk about diversity. It's so diverse, you'll watch me fumble through it. So starting at verse 4, Sopater the Berean, son of Pyrrhus, accompanied him and the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe and Timothy, and the Asians, Tychicus and Trophimus. These went on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas. Talk about a diverse group, right? So Paul ends up going to Ephesus. He spent a bunch of years there. And he's going to Jerusalem. He's not sure if he'll ever see any of them again. These are his homies, his oikos, his people, his household. So he talks to them. He talks to them for a while. It's really just a long goodbye, and a gut-wrenching one at that. And then you jump to 36 after he's done. And when he had said these things, he knelt down and prayed them with them all. And there was much weeping on the part of all. They embraced Paul and kissed him, being sorrowful most of all because the word he had spoken, and they would not see his face again. That they would not see his face again. And they accompanied him to the ship. Again, one of the ways we insulate ourselves from actual companionable affection is the platitude, it's not goodbye, it's I'll see you later. We are really quick to look at Paul's teaching there in Philippians that to be absent of the body is to be present with the Lord, and he'd rather do that. But in this life, he's saying goodbye to friends, and he gets on the ground and weeps. And they all do. Sorrowful. Sorrow's okay. I wonder if that'll get me kicked out of this place. Sorrow's okay. And then Acts 29, even while Paul's in prison, you're like, is this like a luxury suite prison? Because like everyone's there. Like everybody's there. And then it goes on. Paul never wrote a book, an epistle alone. And again, you get to the end, and there's always this list of people that are with him. Epistles were never read alone either. It's kind of a staple. It's an assumption that we read our Bibles alone. They didn't ever read the epistles alone. One, because they couldn't, but maybe they couldn't for good reason, you know? Okay, you can go to the next slide. So your soul is a part of the mission. Your family and team members are your immediate neighbors. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's unintuitive for me to see my wife as my neighbor, to my shame. I will be in a conversation with her, treating her a way verbally that I shouldn't treat another human being, and then walk outside and see my neighbors and instantly say, hey, how are you? As we're headed out to church with a smile on my face. She's my immediate neighbor, and I'm not allowed to treat her that way. And I'm not allowed to be that duplicitous. I'm just not. But we all are. Matthew 22. What does Matthew 22 say? What is it? Yeah, okay. So I do want to say real quick, um, two things. One, in John 13, Jesus says, as I have loved you, love one another. And by this, may the world know that you are my disciples, by how you love one another. I think that Jesus is saying that your greatest evangelistic tool is the way that you love one another. The world is supposed to look in and see the ways that we love one another and say, I was born for that love. I've just never seen it anywhere else. And I didn't know it till now. That's generally how I think people experience Jesus. You're human in a way that I've always longed to be human. And I just didn't know it till now. The way we love one another is supposed to be a testimony to the humanity of Messiah. So we're just going to do a practice. Yeah, we're going to do a practice. When Jesus calls me his disciple and his apprentice, I want to know what that means and how to do that. This is a practice that allows you to examine your own soul. It has been it's been such a gift to me. It's ancient. It's old. That's a modern translation for ancient. And so we're going to do that together. I'm going to give you basically just 5 minutes. If you guys have a journal, which you do because it's at least in your pamphlet, go ahead and pull those out. We can go to the next slide. What did I say? Journal? Yeah, some notepad. Yes, that's good. Notepad. New words. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind. Very simple. We're just going to look at them and isolate them. And we're going to ask Jesus, how do you want me to love you with my mind? And I just want you to take a moment to look at this season of your life. Anytime I transition seasons of my life, I try and do this practice. It's a calibration key so that I know how to properly be a disciple of Jesus. Otherwise, I just wing it and it doesn't look so pretty. So just start with this. We're going to start with mind. Part of the reason that this is valuable is because Christians are properly filled with wonder. We get to discover Jesus everywhere. We get to excavate him everywhere, and it's really, really neat. But I know all of us have probably experienced the danger of not being able to stay in your lane. Ask Jesus what your lane is. What are you trying to teach me? And this doesn't need to be just cognitive. Shout out to Josh Davis. Two different parts of your brain. It really can just be a challenge to use your mind to go view beauty, right? Where did you get that book? The book you've been drawing in? Go to a thrift store and get a book like Josh Davis's and start drawing all over it. It actually helps him to learn better. It's a personal discipline to cultivate his mind and his soul, his mind. So spend 5 minutes and yeah, just spend 5 minutes. I won't go far. Those are some prompts. If you have your own, totally fine. But those are some prompts just to get you started. Definitely start with the first question though. Just ask Jesus the question. Okay. This first question was helpful for me a couple of years ago. I was in grad school because I didn't know that that being a student could be a calling for a time, and it helped to dignify it, and helped me to start to see my classmates as my neighbors in a way that I wouldn't have if I hadn't done this. Okay, we can get to the next one. With your strength. We're generally pretty trash at loving God with our bodies. The idea that our priesthood applies to our bodies as a temple, it makes total sense. Yet for whatever reason, we're just so bad at it. Being present, not just to what we do with our bodies, what we put in our bodies, but also the kinds of emotions that we host, and learning how to be priestly to those emotions. So body, strength. Yeah, I won't give any more than that, but spend 5 minutes. Just ask, always start with just asking Jesus, how are you asking me to steward my body? How do you want me to love you with my body? And then just move through. And don't come up with too many answers unless he's just data dumping. He does that sometimes. But just try and maybe find 2 for each one. Not for each question, for each stage. Okay. Sweet. Next, please. Love God with all your heart. Jesus, how do you want me to be present to my emotions? This is part of the sacrifice. that we were talking about earlier, where we kind of assume that sorrow or grief or our aversions to good things, our aversions to our own desires and longings, we assume that there's, we're supposed to lay them on the altar of our mission to God. So there's something helpful. Orthodoxy, orthopraxy, orthopathy, right teaching, right practice, right affection. An example would be, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not cast out demons, prophesy, do miracles in your name? Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, I didn't know you. So they had the right orthodoxy. They had the right orthopraxy. Lord, Lord, right orthopraxy. Did we not do? There's the orthopathy, you workers of iniquity, right? So we want to be attentive, right, to our affections, to our loves, to our longings, to our desires. Because Jesus is Lord and present even in them. And Jesus felt a whole range of emotion. So just be present. So for me, this often looks like, Jesus, how do I process my depression and anxiety in this season? Jesus, what does it look like to foster Thanksgiving in this season? There are a lot of different ways this cashes out. So I'll let him do his thing and just start with the first question. Jesus, how do you want me to be present to my emotions? Okay. And then the last one is soul. So soul here, think, this gets harder every time. Let's see. So you know how you can observe emotions? You like watch them and you're like, have you ever had that sensation when you're like crying? And you're like, wow, I'm really crying hard. It's almost like out of body. And sometimes in micro ways, you can observe that. It's like, I'm really anxious. Like anxiety is disrupting my soul, right? Or sadness is infringing upon the peace in my soul. You can kind of observe emotion. So the thing behind that, soul, it's kind of like the baseline of who you are. Jesus is always shaping. He is the potter, and our souls are the clay. So when we're thinking of soul, just think character. For me, not just in kind of peripheral or momentary ways. I need to know peace better, right? And that's something in this season that I'm pursuing the Lord in. And so peace is something I would focus in on. But ask him the question, as you've been doing, Jesus, how do you want me to steward my soul? How do you want me to love you with my soul? and he'll give you better prompts than I can create. The coolest part about this practice is that loving God with your heart, strength, soul, and mind means actually loving yourself and being attentive to yourself. Like his requirements upon us to love him demand that we learn how to love ourselves properly. That's how cool he is. I remember first seeing that there in 1 John. We love God because he first loved us. And putting the pieces together that if I'm having an issue loving God, it's because I'm having an issue realizing why he would love me. And that's become just a really helpful prayer language for me. God, I'm struggling to see how you love me. Love me. Love me. And then that activates our affection. We got to see that first. You didn't just muscle your way towards them. Okay, so your soul is part of the mission. Practice like this, and you're welcome to revise this however you need to, is a practice that you can carry with you and do whenever. And it allows you to examine your soul with Jesus in really important ways. And I would encourage you, this is a kind of a crash course, and typically demand a lot more time. But it's really easy to do with other people. There's one more, because there's a second commandment that's like the first, right? We can go to the next slide. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we have to ask the question, Jesus, who is my neighbor? The answer is always going to entail your family, right? Your spouse, your children. Who are the people that have the closest proximity with you? Your team members who are on mission with you. And then start branching out from there. I had this guy that I kept bumping into serendipitously for like months. And eventually we just stopped and I said, hey man, maybe Jesus is doing this. Do you want to like go get non-alcoholic beer? And we've been friends for 5 years. He's one of my best friends in the whole wide world. But it was just trying to be attentive to, oh, Jesus, are you trying to make this person a neighbor? Who are the people who just keep showing up in your life? Well, this last one, who are your enemies? That straight Jesus talk, that makes me way uncomfortable. But it has to ask the question, right? Those are the people we're supposed to actively love, actively pursue. Who are the people that frighten you? The people that you naturally want to avoid, make you uncomfortable. And sometimes just being a neighbor to them means committing for a month, praying for them every morning. Having the whole Hebrews, having your powers of discernment trained to distinguish good from evil plays out a lot in this. And it just starts with the first question, Jesus, who is my neighbor? Okay. I know you guys need more time. I can't give you that, but I've given you the practice and you have the rest of your lives. This is practice that I've done with families, with friends, with church groups, all sorts of different people. It's very easy. It's so easy. I hope it's a gift to you. And thank you for letting me be beside myself. The emotion was just right behind my eyes. And I knew if I was trying to figure out what it looked like for you guys, having Jim O'Neill stand up here, cry, and then 5 minutes later, his son stand up here. It's like, Jim O'Neill just got younger, and it's the same scene. Not much has changed. Okay, well, I'm grateful for you all, and really, the takeaway that I want you to chew on is that your souls are part of the mission. There are a lot of pathologies, and by pathologies, I mean broken narratives that come along with wanting to follow Jesus and how our flesh distorts that. Your souls are part of the mission. It's part of the mission, man. And so are your teams. Grace and peace. Really looking forward to being here with you this week. And thanks for letting me cry in front of you. I love you. All yours, Papu.